On this episode, we're talking about why your fear and anxiety don't actually exist, but you think they do. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Okay, so this episode is going to be an extremely fun one for me. It's like anytime we get to talk about illusion or things that you think are real that are not, we get to talk about like reality shifting and different stuff. It lights me up. But obviously we relate a lot of this stuff back to business, to entrepreneurship, to going after your passion. And look, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. As long as you're going after what you want, it could be a job, it could be whatever, like that's what I want to accomplish. I want to accomplish that, especially with this podcast. But we're going to talk a lot about fear in this episode. We're going to talk a lot about anxiety. But what I want you guys to understand is that when I'm talking about fear, I'm definitely not talking about like physical pain fear. So I'm not like, I don't want you to go, I'm going to drive 150 miles an hour down the road because I have a fear and Brandon just told me it's an illusion. I am not talking about that at all. Like, be safe, people. Come on. But what I am talking about is the fears that are stopping you from going after your dreams, going after your business, risk. Maybe you're filled with anxiety every single day. What I'm going to talk about in the concept here is that it's all that stems from an illusion. And so we're going to kind of give you a different perspective and shift a lot of things for you. And the reason why is because to be a good entrepreneur, and honestly, just as a person, just to be a person who is fulfilled and who's not controlled by things and has internal peace and internal freedom, like you have to understand where anxiety comes from. You have to be able to combat it. You have to be able to get past your fears. You all know the cliche, like your dreams are just on the other side of fear. And it really is true. But all of this stemmed from the other day I went for a hike. So for those of you who are maybe listening to this in the future, we're recording this while we're in the middle of the quarantine. So this is like early 2020 or the first quarter of 2020. And I went for a hike because it's like one of the few things that we can actually do now, although that just got banned. But anyways, I went for a hike the other day with my dog. And so I'm going up this trail and it's like right next to my house. And a lot of people that are from here know and they understand that there's actually tarantulas out here. So Southern California has tarantulas and I'm in the Thousand Oaks area. In fact, there's a hill called Tarantula Hill. Well, I had never seen a tarantula here in my entire life. I've lived here, I've hiked here, I've mountain biked here, I've gone running like hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of miles on these trails. Never seen a tarantula, but I did see it this one day. And I'm very grateful that I did. And the reason why I'm really grateful is because seeing it at the moment that I did, at the time in my life, with the understandings about life that I have, I'm so grateful for it. It gave me a very powerful lesson. And basically what happened is we're walking up the trail, I come around the corner and I see this thing, like it's massive. It's huge tarantula. And so my dog like instantly runs after it. It's on a leash, pull her back. And I'm like, looking at this thing. Obviously you have to Instagram it, right? Like it doesn't exist if it's not on, it's not on Instagram. So I go to like take a picture of it and I'm inches away from it and it doesn't get scared. It just like is still continuing on the path. It's like walking normal. It's going to exactly where it wanted. It's like I didn't even exist. It's not afraid. It's not running off to the right, not running off to the left. It's not running away from us. But the thing that amazed me about this scenario was that I could have killed this thing in a second. I could have stepped on it. I could have thrown a big rock on it. My dog could have like chewed on it. And honestly, she probably would have had I not had her on a leash. She probably would have like jumped on this thing. Like its life could have ended. It could have gone through an immense amount of pain had we decided to, or even if we accidentally did. But the thing didn't care. It didn't move. It went from exactly point A to point Z. It went from where it was to where it wanted to go. And it didn't even care that we were there. And so I asked myself, why is that? Why is this thing not afraid of us? Why is it going and how is it able to go exactly from point A to point Z? And the reason why that question was so important is because as entrepreneurs, and it just is people on this planet, we let our fear and our anxiety dictate our actions. We all know where we want to go, whether that's a happy life, a fulfilled life, a business, a dream job. But we let fear and anxiety force us to run to the right, run to the left, and not go in a direct line from A to Z. And we all do it, but this tarantula wasn't doing it. And you really have to ask yourself, and this is the question I ask myself, is why? Well, it didn't know it was supposed to be afraid. It hasn't been told by its parents. I don't know if tarantulas have parents, but we'll just, in the scenario, I mean, obviously they have parents, but I don't know if they're like, listen, little tarantula, you need to do this. This is the way of life. But let's just pretend that they do. It wasn't told by its parents like, hey, there's going to be these humans and you need to like be afraid of them. It was never told that. And so us as parents, we tell our kids all the time, and as people, we've been told by our parents, this is bad, this is good. You want this, you don't want this. When you have this, it's not very good. So this could be things like, you don't want any debt. You need to go to college. If you don't go to college, you're going to be a failure. And what happens is like a baby isn't born with all of this stuff in its head. It's not born with like, this is the right way to operate in society. This is the wrong way, but it learns it. We also learn through experience. So, if we had 5 failed businesses and we experienced 5 failed businesses, we're 10 times more likely, and that's not an actual stat, but let's just go with it, 10 times more likely to be afraid to start business number 6. Whereas the person who hasn't had a failed business doesn't have that fear. They just are filled with excitement. So do you think the person has a better chance of succeeding if they're the person who's filled with more excitement versus the person who's operating out of fear? And so what I want to ask you guys is anytime you have a fear, is it just an illusion? Is it something that you've been indoctrinated into, you've been told is right or wrong? Because if that tarantula had been told, hey, by its tarantula parents, you need to be afraid of humans and dogs, and if you see them, you need to run away, that thing would have seen us and it would have bolted. It would have bolted to the right. It would have bolted to the left. It would not have gotten to the destination from A to Z that it wanted to be in the amount of time it wanted to be. But it had not learned that. It had not been told by its parents. It had not had an experience where dogs or humans cause it trouble or pain. So what did it do exactly from point A to point Z? Without any hesitation, without any anxiety, without any fear, just trotted right along. And most people will look at that and they'll go, that's dangerous though. That is so dangerous. You could have stepped on it. Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. You could get in a car accident every single day. You get in the car, but you don't have that fear or worry. You could die in your sleep tonight, but you don't go to bed in fear. So yeah, things could happen all the time. But what happens is we let the what if possibility of the negative, because we've been told and indoctrinated through experience or our parents that you need to avoid all of that. And the thing that people don't understand is that when we operate from fear, we generally start to create the thing that we're afraid of. So for example, I'm going to relate this back to business. If I was to start a business and I was going in and I had $50,000 in savings and it was and I needed to spend all of my $50,000 in savings into my business. And then this fear, because I think I'm not supposed to be broke because, broke is bad. And I don't want to be broke. I let that fear of, oh my God, I have this 50,000. I better make this work. And you're filled with anxiety. You're filled with fear because you think being broke is bad, because you were told being broke is bad. Who do you think you're being inside of your business? What kind of decisions do you think you're going to be making? How do you think you're going to be operating inside of your business when you're filled with fear? Are you going to be the type of business owner that actually sees success? And again, this doesn't have to relate to business. This could be anything. You could be anyone filled with fear and anxiety. So what starts to happen if in that example, if you're the person who spends the $50,000, you're absolutely afraid of losing the money. You make all these decisions out of fear. You actually start losing the money because you're not making the right decisions that are going to cause you to be successful. However, if you didn't have the fear, you invested the money, you found the mentors, you took the courses, you took the programs, you invested in the advertising. You did all the things you're supposed to do because you didn't have the fear. Now you start to make the money. So what's ironic is it's a vicious cycle of like, I'm filled with anxiety and fear because I don't want X, Y, and Z. But then when you start operating there, you actually create X, Y, and Z. And what that does is reinforce that the fear and anxiety were right. So then what happens is you're the business owner and you go, oh, gosh, making all these decisions. Oh, I'm losing money. See, I told you this was a bad idea. I knew I should have been afraid. I knew. And then you lose your money because you're operating out of the fear. And then you're broke and you go, yeah, man, that fear was right. That anxiety was right. And it reinforces the behavior, and it's a vicious cycle that most people never get out of. Because I can tell you right now, the people that actually make the money, become successful, are the ones that are either moving past fear and past their anxiety or not having it at all. Because you can create a reality where you decide to not operate from fear. And you create and make decisions from opportunity versus what you're afraid to lose. And it's a very important distinction that I hope you guys are grasping, is that you can choose to operate with the fear. So for example, fear is something that's actually in us. I don't know the science behind it, but I know that fear is something that you're typically never going to get rid of. It's just a part of being human. But there's a difference between making decisions from the place of fear versus having the fear and making decisions from the place of opportunity. That's a big, massive difference. Fine distinction, but massive, massive difference. And so what we call that is courageous. So I didn't know I had this trait in me. One of my mentors, again, I talk about him all the time, Jim Fortin, told me, one of the reasons why you're successful is you had all these fears of losing the money and losing all the stuff and whatever, but you did it anyways, and you weren't making a decision from what you could lose. You're making a decision from what you can gain, and that's courageous. So you can be fearful and have it and move forward anyways. But when we look at the pandemic and we look at what's going on right now, and we look at people that are filled with anxiety and filled with fear, and they're stuck at home and they're like, oh, I hate this and blah, 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 blah. What I want you to ask yourself and what I want you to take into consideration is, what if you grew up like that? Like, what if we grew up just being at home all the time? Like, what if movie theaters didn't exist? What if going to a job didn't exist? And I know this is hypothetical, but just what if that was what we viewed as normal? You would not be filled with anxiety. You would not be filled with fear. This would just be normal. You would not be afraid of anything. But what's happened is your past experience, so your past life, which has been an amazing life, has told you this is what normal is. And now you don't have that. So that brings up fear, that brings up anxiety, that brings up uncomfortableness. And so what we have to do is, and one of the things that I would love for you guys to really consider, is this amazing life. It basically stretched your reality. It stretched your expectations. So what you're doing now is you're actually using this great life, which should be celebrated, and you're using it as something to cause suffering in your life right now. Oh, I can't go out. Oh, I don't have the freedom. Oh, I don't have this. Oh, I don't have that. So what I really want you to ask yourself, is that great life really so great if you're allowing it to cause suffering in your life now? In my opinion, I don't really think so. So what we could do is be very grateful for what we still do have, be grateful that we have more time with our family, be grateful that we're, hopefully you guys don't have the virus, that we don't have the virus, be grateful for that we still have running water, that we still have food, and just be grateful every single day for the things that we have. And you can separate the life that we had before all of this from what the life is now. And not one is bad. It's because what you've had is, here's what I had, and here's what is normal, and I don't have that, therefore I'm going to suffer, therefore I'm going to complain, therefore I'm not going to be happy, therefore I'm going to be filled with anxiety because things are not normal and things are uncomfortable. But what we can always do is learn to shift our perspective and not let this thing that we used to have ruin the current life. We don't want to take this like amazing, beautiful life and take this freedom and then all of a sudden say, I don't have it anymore, therefore this life is bad, I'm going to be filled with fear. You're taking a really great, amazing thing that should be celebrated and allowing it to cause suffering in your life right now. So gratefulness really is the key to all of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a couple steps on how to remove fear and how to go through it, and kind of like things that I hope you guys can realize. But what this stems from is, you're born as a baby, right? You're just born. You have no experiences. So you have no stretch of what reality is, meaning that, you're a baby, you're kind of like in the middle, right? You have, let's say you're like 5 years old and you learn to ride a bike and you're like, oh, this is amazing. So your expectations get stretched to the right. Then maybe you fall off the bike and they're like, oh, this is an awful experience. So now your experience gets stretched to the left, like a negative experience. And even that's subjective. So let's just say a different experience, but something you didn't really enjoy. And then you start having bigger wins and bigger losses. So now your reality gets stretched even more, even more, even more. And what starts to happen over time is that when you move into bigger and better things, the things that you used to worry about, they're not problems anymore. And so if those things aren't going to be problems in your future, why is it a problem now? So let me give you guys kind of like an analytical way to think about this. For example, when I was starting my business, there was a point where I was $40,000 in debt. And that was me stretching to like the end of the negative side of the experiences that I've had in my life. And I'll be honest, it caused a lot of like anxiety and pain and suffering and fear inside of me. But I came out of it and I got stretched all the way on the other side, and we did $1.2 million in sales. Now looking back at that $40,000 in debt, that's like nothing. We have money in the bank, we could pay that off. Like being $40,000 in debt right now doesn't scare me. However, if I looked at my version of myself 2 years ago, I was scared to my core. But if it's possible for me now in this day and age to not be concerned, not have fear, not have anxiety about being $40,000 in debt, it's also possible to have that back then. So one of the things that I've done is I've just looked at what is the future version of myself? What amazing experiences do we have? How could this possibly be worse? And I start looking at worse scenarios. And when I start imagining worse scenarios and things that people have gone through, I look at my situation, I'm like, it's not bad. I have it easy. This is great. If were able to come out of a spot way worse than mine, then I should be able to come out of this as well. So we have to start looking at like, what have we been told is bad? Bring this whole back to the tarantula story. What have we been told is bad? What stories have you been told by your parents? What fear and anxiety do you have right now that is being caused in your life because there's something that you're afraid of happening to you? Was it really bad? Like when I look back, I had this story of debt is bad. I had this story of debt is bad. I can't be $40,000 in debt. Therefore, I'm going to suffer because of this. Therefore, I'm going to be filled with anxiety. Therefore, whatever. But really, at the end of the day, I could have filed bankruptcy and just started over. I could have moved back in with my in-laws, but you know what I looked at and I said, I can't move back with my in-laws. That's going backwards. According to who? Who says that's backwards? Who cares? Society told me that. Society told me you're 35, you shouldn't be living with your in-laws, you shouldn't be doing whatever. Therefore, it caused pain in my life because I didn't want to go into bankruptcy. I wanted to get rid of my debt. And I was afraid of all of this stuff when in fact, none of it actually mattered. The only thing that mattered is I made it mean something because I let society and the society norms and I let the world and I let my parents and I let all these things tell me what is good and what is bad. You know, there's nothing is good and nothing is bad. There's just events that happen in people's lives and then they get classified as good or bad based on how you were told to think. Much like that tarantula, he didn't think about anything. He just went from point A to point Z because he's not been told, he didn't have an experience that told him this is what normal is, this is the way it should be. He's just like, and went from point A to point Z. So I want you to think about in your life, where have you been, what have you wanted to accomplish in your life, but where have you been turning right? Where have you been turning left instead of just going straight to the destination? And what has actually caused that? Was it something that you've been indoctrinated into? Was it something that society told you is bad if you go and you have that? And is it really that bad? Most of your fear in life will come from indoctrination, through experience, through life, through your parents. It came from somewhere, which means that it was created, it was all made up. So this whole idea that bankruptcy is bad has been told to us through society. It was made up. This idea that it was bad was made up. This idea that debt was bad was made up. Oh, you don't want that. How many times have we heard that, especially from like financial gurus? Oh, that's bad, blah, 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 blah. You don't want that. I'll tell you guys something. There was a point in my business where we were $40,000 in debt. Yes, we did $1.2 million in sales. Let me tell you how that $1.2 million in sales came about. So Taylor came on board. We started building out the company. We pivoted. We started leaning into messaging and created the Video Forex Effect. We started selling it. We started bringing in more revenue, but revenue went right back out the door. It was like, yes, we were doing great, but we had to hire a team. We actually doubled the size of our office. We started investing in launches and spending more money. And I think we started back in, it was like 2018 of May, I think. So 2018 of October, we decided to do back-to-back launches. We were promoting someone else's product, and then we were launching the first official version of the Video Forex Effect. And we spent $100,000. We spent $100,000 in ad spend between those two launches. And the affiliate launch, which means we were promoting someone else's product and we would get a commission, we don't get paid on that for 30 days after it closes. So it's like a net 30 type of thing. So I spent all this money, then we went right into our launch, and I put a lot of it on credit cards. One of the reasons why is, did we technically have the $100,000 in the bank? Yes, but I wasn't going to take 100% of our cash and put it right into these 2 launches because I still needed to make payroll and I still needed to do this stuff. So we actually put a decent amount of that on credit cards. So I technically had, I don't remember the exact number, but I had a ton of money in credit card debt. But the result of those 2 launches was over $600,000 in revenue. Had I let the fear, let people tell me debt is bad, you don't want debt, and I did not do that, I would not have made $600,000. So are you now telling me debt is bad? No. Debt was good in that scenario because it allowed me to create something bigger and better. But had I been the tarantula that churned to the right instead of going straight to A to Z, that would not have happened. What I was in that scenario was a tarantula that went from point A to point Z. The fear stops you from going from point A to point Z. It stops you, it slows you down, it slows your progress, and it stops you from maybe even ever getting to where you want to go. So what we don't want to do is start to operate from that place. And then, because when you do, again, just to repeat myself a little bit, when you do, what happens is it actually creates the place of the thing that you were afraid of in the first place, which then reinforces the belief. It's a very vicious cycle. So let's talk about how do we remove the fear? Well, the very first step, and this is all going to come from experience. So as you guys know, and as you guys get into deeper episodes of the podcast, you'll start to realize I only really teach from the knowing, which comes from experience. I don't teach from theory. I don't teach regurgitate stuff. I teach from my actual experience. And so I'm going to give you my process of what's worked for me over the years of building a multi-million-dollar company. But the first step is recognizing it. And what I want to do is get you to recognize okay, I have a fear right now and I have anxiety right now. And first, just recognize that it's an actual thing and that it's based off an illusion. So what I want you to do is ask yourself, what am I afraid that will actually happen? What is the worst that's going to actually happen? Because if you have a fear of something, you're not afraid of taking the action. You're a fear of a really bad result of what that action is going to produce. So what I want you to do is to, first of all, identify where you want to go. And I want you to ask yourselves, okay, I want happiness, or I want money, or I want success, or I want $1 million business. Where do you want to actually go? And actually ask yourself, what do you want? And every time you get closer and closer to that, and you feel like you're going to veer off to the right, make a bad decision, or you have some kind of a fear and anxiety, you need to move into the next part is ask yourself, why is the fear happening? Where is the fear coming from? Were you taught by your parents? Were you taught by experience to not want this thing? That this thing is bad? Are you giving the result that you're afraid of some kind of meaning that doesn't really exist? Can you give it a different meaning? Can you flip your perspective on it? And if you're a parent, I really want you guys to teach this to your kids. Teach your kids to live in the chaos. Let them jump in the puddles. Let them, express their creativity. Let them be okay with having a mess. Let them be okay with not having so much structure in their life and following their passion and doing the things they want. Because what's going to happen is if you don't let them go and do the things that they want to do and jump in the puddle and learn that everything's going to be okay, they freak out when things are quote unquote not okay. So I'm very much okay. And I tell my team this all the time, there's nothing that you guys can do or mistake that can be made inside this company that's going to bring us down. And because I've been taught and I've learned over the years that chaos is fine, things are fine. I'm okay with whatever's going to happen. I have no expectations. I'm okay with things not happening the way I want them to happen. I'm okay with just going with the flow. And what happens is a lot of times our fears are based on things need to be this way. They shouldn't be this way. If it's this way, it's bad, instead of just being able to accept and go with the flow. So what you're doing when you tell your kids they need to be a certain way is you're probably creating future pain, fear, and anxiety in their life. And you're creating more fear in their life. Now, I want you to give you an example so this really comes full circle here is when we look at the founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely, I think her name is. Sarah Blakely? Yeah, founder, I think it's Sarah Blakely. One of the things that her parents did was growing up was her dad completely reframed what failure meant, and he gave it a new meaning. And this is what I'm talking about when I say first step is identify, first recognize what you want. When you run into a block, what's the thing you're afraid of? Let's look at the meaning that you're giving that. So if you're afraid of failure, like you're saying, okay, Brandon, I want to become $1 million business. Step number one, great. I know that's what it is. Step number two is I have to invest this money, but I'm afraid to do it. Where does that fear come from? Well, if I invest the money and I lose it, that means I'm a failure. Okay, what meaning are you giving failure? So when we look at the story of Sarah Blakely, her dad would sit her down and her brother down every night at the dinner table, and he would say, what is one thing that you guys failed at today? And let's celebrate it. And so they'd be like, oh, Dad, I did this and it didn't work, or I didn't get the result that I want. And he's like, that's amazing. You got to keep trying. You got to keep doing it. I'm so proud of you guys. And what he did is he completely reframed failure to his kids, and his daughter went off to create a $1 billion company. Why? Because she didn't view failure as the way that most people view failure. She gave it a different meaning. She realized, I took an action and got a result. Yes, the result didn't meet my expectation, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's good. I'm one step closer to getting to where I want to go. So we have to understand that the way you guys put meaning on things, the result that you're afraid of, the way you put meaning on stuff, and the way you tell your kids to put meaning on it can literally dictate the fear and anxiety that they're going to have in their life. Now, here's the other thing. The next step is you just have to do it anyways. But that's very easy for me to say, is like, you have a fear, just move past it. So what I want you to do is actually start small. I want you guys to start small with some kind of fear. This is not going to be something that's ever going to go away, but the ability to move past fear becomes easier and easier the more you do it, just like anything. So the third step is actually just do very small things. So you might have this massive fear that you're afraid of. I don't want you to tackle that right now. Find a small thing. Go accomplish that, because this is going to take mastery. It's something that's always going to be in your life. But I can tell you one thing. When you start doing one small thing and obliterating one fear and getting rid of one anxiety, the process of going after another one, it gets more exciting. It gets easier. It becomes really liberating. You get rid of one small fear and one thing and one anxiety, that's like a huge weight off of your shoulder. And if you can do that over and over and over again, you can start to tackle the bigger things. You can start to do it over and over and over again. And what starts to happen too is that when you start to go after and obliterate the small fears, the things that you view as problems actually start to fade away. And I can tell you guys this. I can tell you exactly how much money someone makes inside their business by a 5-minute conversation. And one of the reasons why is because I can identify the problems that they perceive in their life. The things that $1 million business owner perceives as a problem is not the same thing that a under $100,000 a year or even a $500,000 a year entrepreneur views as a problem. What you perceive as a problem will literally dictate how successful you are. But in order to get that, you have to get through the small fears. So don't start with the big ones, start with the small ones. And I want you guys to always put things into perspective and to always be grateful for a new experience that you're about to gain. Going through all the things that I went through, being in debt, living at my in-laws, being broke, all of that stuff, they all left me with a very valuable lesson. And I actually love that stuff. Like a lot of the things that people are afraid of happening to them, like, oh my God, I put money into a launch and I lost 20 grand. I'm like, I thrive off of that stuff now because it's giving me a lesson that's going to allow me to come back and make more money. The problem is when people don't understand this, suffering is actually a gift. Suffering is a gift that gives you perspective. It's a gift that gives you a lesson. It's a necessary part of becoming successful. But what happens is most people look at the pain, they look at the failure, they look at whatever, and they're so focused on the negative outcome or what they perceive as a negative outcome that they actually miss the gift that was given to them, and they never take advantage of it, and they let that thing suffocate them their entire life. And so I was just watching Masterclass. I don't know if you guys watch this, but Doris Goodwin had a masterclass in the company. There's a company called Masterclass, and they have all these experts and like celebrities come in and teach courses and stuff. And there was one talking about like leadership and presidency. And this lady, Doris Goodwin, talked about Roosevelt and President Roosevelt. And so this is like really early in his career. I don't even think he was in politics or anything. He was super young. So anyways, he was out somewhere across the country and he got a call that, his wife had a baby and they were all celebrating and having cigars and all of that stuff. He got a little telegram. And then like a day later, he got a telegram that says, you need to come home. Your wife and your mom both died. And so his whole world was like just torn apart. And most people would look at this and go like, this is awful. This, I should filled with fear and anxiety and worry and all of this stuff. But he took off to the woods. I think they called it the Badlands. And in the woods is where he found his love for nature and the land. And as you guys know, a lot of his campaign and what he did in the presidency was off of conservation. It became a big, huge part of his career because of that moment. And then he ended up coming back to become president. But the reason why I bring this up is because what happened is he actually had a plan of how he wanted to become president. His plan was, and he would tell everyone, like, I have this plan. It's the normal plan on how people become president. I'm going to go into the state legislature. I'm going to become the state senate. Then I'm going to become a congressman. Then so and so on, blah, 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 blah. But what he ended up doing is he ended up having this one experience that most people perceive as bad, would cause fear, would cause anxiety. They'd be so worried about it happening again. But he used it to inspire him. He used it to give him a different perspective on life, that like, you have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm going to go after this now. I'm going to live in fear. I'm not going to live in anxiety. I'm not going to worry about people dying. I'm not going to worry about me dying. I'm going to go after it now. And he took off to the woods. He went in and did what he did. And then he went against the grain. He didn't go through the normal process of becoming a president. He took off to the woods and he came back and he was a civil service commissioner. And then he was the New York City police commissioner. And then he was the assistant secretary of the Navy, and then the governor, then the vice president and the president. But he didn't do the normal plan that he had. Life threw him a curveball. He decided to adapt, to thrive off of it, to learn the lesson. He didn't let that squash his career. He didn't let that destroy him. He let it empower him. He accepted that, hey, life threw me this curveball. I'm still going to go after what I want. And he didn't let the fear take him down. Society would tell you, oh, you know what? You need to suffer for 6 months. You need to cry and sit in a room, and you need to do blah, 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 blah. And he processed it in his own way. When there's a problem and you never move past the fear, you never learn the lesson. And if you're going to let fear and anxiety control your life, you're never going to be the successful entrepreneur that you want to be. You're never going to find the happiness. Yes, life is filled with so much ups and downs, but a lot of the things we don't realize is a lot of the downs are there because we think they're supposed to be called downs. We think we're supposed to have a certain type of emotion. We're told by our parents, be afraid of this. You don't want that. And then what we start to do is we look at all these fears we have in our life and we just think that is normal to be afraid of. We think I'm afraid of this result that it's going to produce if I mess up. And as soon as I have that result, it means X, Y, and Z. But when we never realize is we get to change that X, Y, and Z to be anything we want. We can be like Roosevelt and allow it to empower us. We can let it destroy us. We can decide to learn the lessons from it. And what I've learned through my entrepreneurship is, yes, fears are normal. Yes, they are stemming from a place of a meaning that you gave the result that you don't want. But you can get past it. It starts small. And I've learned to love the suffering. I really do. Anytime I have a really hard time in my life, I'm just asking myself, what lessons am I learning right now? What am I going to be able to gain in my life because of the perspective this is giving me? What gift am I getting right now that I'm not seeing? And I literally look at my struggles and my hard times as freaking gifts because they are. And if you guys haven't realized that, it might be one of the reasons why you're stuck in business. You can't seem to move past the block that you're on right now. So to wrap this up, the one thing I want to leave you guys with is a lot of the times when we have fear and anxiety, it's because we think we're supposed to be afraid of things because society or our parents or experience have told us that you need to be afraid of it because they've attached a really bad meaning to the result that you're trying to avoid. When in fact, the meaning can be anything you want. Just like Sarah Blakely looked at failure as a really good thing. And in fact, most successful people that I know looked at failure as a really good thing. I think it was Einstein that said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. Was Einstein? I didn't fail 1,000 times with the light bulb. I found 1,000 ways it didn't work or something like that. Or is it Edison? One of them, one of those guys. But anyways, one of them said something along those lines. And that's how I choose to live my life. Edison? Yeah, Edison said that. So anyways, that's the way I live my life. And just remember, anytime you guys feel fear and anxiety, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to suppress it. I don't want you to shove it down because you're trying to be like this badass person, whatever. But I want you to do is process the emotion, feel the emotion, but also recognize that what is it that you're actually afraid of and what meaning did you give that thing that you can adjust now? And if you're raising kids, you know, how can you frame things in a certain way to cause them to thrive? How can you show them to adapt to change? Because change is coming and it's coming fast and it's going to continue coming. How can you tell them to be okay with things being quote unquote in chaos? How can you show them to thrive even if they're worried about stuff, to show them that worry is a normal thing? I'll leave you one last thing. We'll wrap this up. When we worry about stuff, what people don't understand is that all worry is living in the suffering that isn't here yet. And what I tell people all the time is if you can live in the suffering of something that isn't here yet, you can also live in the joy of something that isn't here yet. So with that said, we're going to end this episode. And if you guys enjoyed this, you've enjoyed the past episodes, I would love, absolutely love, and I'd be so grateful for a review on iTunes. If you feel like we deserve a 5-star review, go ahead, leave a 5-star review on iTunes, and I would be very appreciative of that. So thank you guys so much. Tune back into the next episode, and I'll see you there.